Okay, so good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. It's really kind of good to have you here. Um, so I'm really, and welcome to this afternoon session. So I'm really excited to kind of dive into today's topic, which is authenticity in action, leading through faith and values. Now, I've heard some people think that the word authentic is a bit of an overused description. Okay, so people think that people just everything's authentic. So I'm talking about here, just for clarity, I'm talking about being real. I'm talking about being fully you in all that you do in the workplace. So as leaders, it's about kind of bringing your whole self, everything about you and bringing that into the workplace. So as leaders, you probably recognize that leadership is about more than just making decisions. It's actually about influencing, it's about, inspiring and guiding your teams to achieve a shared vision. The question is, what happens when your personal beliefs and faith comes into contact with your professional leadership? So that's the question. Um, so today we're going to be kind of exploring how integrating faith into your leadership can not only shape your character, but it can improve performance, it can improve engagement, and it can actually be the ethical foundation for your organization. And if you're still wondering if faith can truly influence the bottom line, I'm here to tell you that absolutely it can. Absolutely it can. So, our mission, just so that you know you're in the right place, our mission is to create a welcoming space where leaders are empowered to align their faith, their values, and their ethics with their leadership. Now, through this alignment, we can help leaders to increase their impact, their impact authentically. So it's about increasing their impact that they have, but doing that in a real way, in an authentic way, and so they can achieve business success with integrity, and they can do that across, every sphere of influence that they have. So that's kind of what we're about. So, in today's session, we're going to be looking at a few things. We're going to be looking at defining what authentic leadership is. We're going to be looking at the link between faith and leadership performance. We're going to take a brief look at how faith can enhance your leadership capacity. We're going to run a quick interactive activity around self-reflection and leadership alignment. And then finally, I'm going to share a little bit about our free leadership impact and influence audit offer. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing today. So my name's Oenka Fontaine, and I'm dedicated to helping faith-driven leaders align their talents, their values, and their spiritual gifts to create phenomenal business success. Okay, so let's first start off today then by just, defining what authentic leadership is. So that's where we're going first. Okay. And obviously, I was just going to say, as we start, if you've got any questions, you've got any thoughts or just comments, feel free to use the chat box, because that's kind of where we're going to be communicating, how we're going to be communicating through this session. Okay, so feel free to add any comments, questions, and I'll be looking at the chat as we go through today. Okay, so defining authentic leadership. So, authentic leadership is about being genuine and true to your values. It means that your actions align with your beliefs, whether those beliefs are personal, spiritual, or ethical. And leaders who lead authentically are self aware, they're transparent, and they're consistent in both their words and their actions. So, that whole adage that says, do as I do, not necessarily what I say. So it's about your actions and how people see your actions, and they mimic and or mirror that. And so when you are kind of being authentically you in all parts of your life, that's what people are seeing. I don't know about you, but I don't know if you've ever ever had been in a situation, whether you're a leader or a manager you may have had in the past, where when you're getting into work, you're actually not sure which person you're going to meet when you arrive. It's almost like you're walking on eggshells just to see what their first response is going to be. And if you get you're greeted with a smile, you're like, they're in a good mood. Everything's all cool. But if you're greeted with a bit of a scowl, then you're like, you know what, let's just get on with the work and just keep a low profile. Or even you may go to meetings and you've got, leaders and managers that and they act a particular way. And then when somebody walks in the room, whether it's a visitor or a high level senior manager, all of a sudden they behave differently. It's almost like, who's who, what's the real person? So we're not talking about being like that. We're talking about being you through and through in all situations. So that's where the authenticity comes in. So that's kind of where we're going. Okay, so in the business world, being genuine in whatever you do actually fosters trust, which is a key element for any successful team or organization. So when people are able to trust you, they work the best. Now, studies show that organizations with authentic or integrity-driven leadership enjoy high levels of employee engagement, high levels of trust, and actually they have like staff loyalty as well. And if we take as an example, so I always kind of look, well, okay, this is what everybody wants in business, for employees to be engaged, for them to be to trust their senior managers, and that we actually, high levels of productivity. We want all of that. But I then ask myself, so does this really happen in business? So if we take Truett Cathy, and he was the founder of Chick-fil-A, as an example, okay, so he built his entire company on his faith-based values, including the decision to close down his stores on a Sunday to allow his employees to have time for rest and time with their family. So that was an example, of him actually leading his organization based on his values. Now, despite the potential financial loss to this commitment, to his values, it actually strengthened his brand's reputation and really increased and built customer and employee loyalty. The Chick-fil-A became not just a powerhouse because of its food in the US, but it also became, because of the authenticity and transparency that it demonstrated in its leadership. So for me, I'm hoping you too, that kind of proves that that real faith-based leadership doesn't just align personal values. That's not what it's all about. It can also drive, real business success too. Okay, so let's kind of move on a little bit. Okay, so what is the link between faith and leadership performance? So what we'd like to, because I do like a few statistics. So we're going to look at some statistics to demonstrate how leading with authenticity and faith can actually positively affect organizational performance. So according to the Harvard Business Review, 75% of employees who believe their leaders are authentic are more likely to be engaged at work. Now, I think this is really interesting because it's not about, this is about employees, staff believing that their leaders are authentic. So there must be something about what their leaders do, how consistent they are in the workplace, that get those employees and staff to believe their leaders. And when employees believe that about their leaders, they are, more engaged at work. So I think that's quite interesting. But also 72% of leaders who practice value-based leadership report higher organizational performance as well. And that's according to the Center for Ethical Leadership. Now, finally, studies also show that companies with strong ethical leadership, they enjoy high levels of trust, which then leads to better decision making, in more improved employee morale, which I guess is a really important thing, and also higher customer satisfaction. So like I said, whenever we look at those indicators of organizations that are successful and doing well, they are looking at things like high levels of trust, better decision making, definitely really good or high employee morale and great customer satisfaction. Okay, so let's just kind of talk a little bit about how faith specifically shapes leadership. So don't forget, if you've got anything you want to add, feel free to add those in the chat as we go along, any questions or any comments. Okay, so let's look about, specifically about how faith shapes leadership. Now, forgive me, but I really can't stress this next point strongly enough. Okay, and I do keep saying it, I'll probably still keep saying it. You see, faith-based leadership is not about imposing religion on others in the workplace. So as an ethical leader, that doesn't necessarily give you license to kind of try to push religion into employees, or to make it a condition that they have to belong to a particular church, or to even try to galvanize that. That's not what it's about. Okay, so it's not about imposing religion on people. Fantastic. No, they are. I do love a good stats, so that's really cool. Thank you. Okay, but what it's actually about, so what authentic, what ethical and faith-based leadership is all about, it's actually about integrating the values like integrity, honesty, compassion, and service into your decision making. And when leaders live out these values in real and genuine ways, it actually creates a culture of trust and accountability. So not only do people want to be held accountable, do you know what I mean? They want to hold you accountable and they can depend on you. But when you are, authentic in your leadership, people are quite willing to be held accountable for the actions, or for kind of targets and things like that in a business, because you are a person who's authentic and have that integrity. And I often think about Jesus in this kind of instance. When you think about how he led, he didn't necessarily go around telling people what they had to believe. He went about, doing good, supporting them, being where they're at, showing empathy, showing genuine concern, and meeting their needs. So I guess that's a real good example of how, we can live out kind of authenticity and live out that in the workplace. Now, this alignment between personal beliefs and professional actions, again, fosters a deeper connection with employees, making them feel heard, valued, and respected. Again, that's a good thing. Now, an example of this is Chick-fil-A's second CEO, Dan Cathy. Now, Dan Cathy publicly stands on his Christian beliefs. Cathy believes that, he believes in leading with humility, with respect, and with integrity. And these values have kind of built, an incredible loyalty in his team, and also, built a really great customer base as well. So a really incredibly loyal team and a great customer base. So I'm hoping that you can see that by leading with faith-based values, Cathy not only demonstrated ethical leadership, but also built a profitable and sustainable business. So now let's turn our attention to how faith can enhance leadership capacity. How can faith enhance leadership capacity? So this is where we're going next. Okay. So leading with real authenticity is not always easy, because as leaders, we often face, pressure to conform to certain expectations or to conform to certain behaviors. So I don't know, I just remember in my past experience, I worked in motor manufacturing, and I was part of kind of Rover Group, and it was just kind of really interesting as we went through, so many different takeovers and joint ventures, whether it was Honda, whether it was kind of BMW, whether it was Ford. It was just really interesting to see how people's personalities, how people showed up differently in the workplace, depending on who was kind of leading us at that time. It was a really interesting thing to witness. And so when we're talking about authenticity, we're talking about being you regardless. So the key to real authentic leadership is actually staying true to your core values, even when it's difficult. So even when it's difficult, even though, it might feel like the right thing to behave in a certain way in order to align yourself with this part of the business, or, to achieve things in a particular way, but being really, true to your core values, even when it's difficult, um, is a real mark of authentic leadership. And for me, this is where faith comes in. This is really where faith comes in. So faith, your faith provides a strong foundation that helps leaders to navigate challenges with confidence, reliance, and with grace. And I just love the idea of kind of leading with grace. It's almost like I imagine, that the analogy of the swan or the duck on the water, where everything looks just really smooth and graceful, but underneath their legs are kind of going into the desert. So yeah, that's me. It's like being able to lead with grace, and faith gives you that opportunity. You see, faith can guide you to make tough decisions that may not always be the most popular decisions, but they're always the right decision. So your faith can help you in those circumstances. So as an example, if we consider Pat Gelsinger, so he's the CEO of Intel. So he's a devout Christian, and Gelsinger has openly shared how his faith influences his leadership decisions. So he believes that business is not just about profit, making a profit, but it's also about serving others, creating an environment where employees, where staff can actually flourish, which I think is great. And under his leadership, Intel has experienced a rebirth, increase in innovation, and also increase in ethical standards, and whilst they're also thriving financially. So I just think that's pretty cool. Okay, so now I've done a bit of talking, now it's time for you to kind of do some work. Okay, so I'd like us to take a moment to engage in a self-reflection activity. So fingers on the buzzers, as we say. So I want you to think about how your personal faith and values align with your leadership actions. So I'll say that again. I want you to think about how your personal faith and values align with your leadership actions. So this activity is going to help you to assess if there's any gap between your beliefs and how you lead in the workplace, how you show up at work. So I'm going to ask you to take a moment to reflect on the following questions. So number one, what are your core values? So these could be values that you live by in your personal life, but it could also be the values that guide your decision making in business. So what are your core values? How do your values align with your actions as a leader? So are they consistent? Are you consistent in showing these values at work? And then three, what's one area of your leadership where you could be more genuine and authentic, or more authentic? Okay, so what this is going to look like is, on a scale of 1 to 5, I'm going to ask you to rate yourself on each of the questions. So 1 is very inconsistent, 5 is very consistent. And so there'll be some sheets that will come, that you'll have some sheets. Individuals will have their own sheets that they can click on, and actually they can fill that in, or you can just kind of think your way through it and fill the sheets out later. Okay, so I'm going to ask you just to take a few moments just to reflect and rate yourself honestly. So this is not about judgment. This is not about judgment. This is just about giving us an opportunity just to reflect on, do we really show up consistently in an authentic way in the workplace? Oh, so what we've got here? Okay, my core value is honesty, being a communicator on behalf of others. Yeah, okay, often means compromising because that's what your clients want to say. I think that's a really interesting point, and I think that's another example of that kind of sometimes the pressures that we have within our workplace, or depending on the work that we do. Okay, we've got core value being empathy, and also integrity. So I'm loving these. These are great values. So we've got, definitely honesty, empathy, and integrity. Oh, we've also got leading by example. That's a great one as well. We often talk about, people who follow you in an organization. Like I said it before, they don't just do what you say, they actually do what you do. So that's kind of really brilliant. I love that. Okay, fantastic. So I guess, yeah, if I was thinking about, one of my core values is truthfulness. Okay, but I have to be careful not to get myself into trouble. So it's about being truthful, but doing it in love. And I guess for me, a challenge is like, talking to a potential client and they ask you a pertinent question that can be the defining moment as to whether or not they want to work with you or not. So it's kind of, at that moment, what is it that, I say, and how do I do that truthfully? So, okay, so as you rate yourself, I do share your core values, a challenge you've identified, or an insight about your leadership, and post that in the chat. So what else have we got? Okay, so as a leader, I prioritize making decisions that align with my values, ensuring transparency and trust in my actions. And that's beautiful. That is really beautiful to kind of have that thought processing and allowing your actions to follow that. That's a really brilliant example. And if you're doing that again, just think about how that would transpire across your organization with other people doing the same thing as you. So that's really great. Now I've got a couple of other interesting ones. So here we go. So I just have interest. Which question was the hardest to reflect on? Which question was the hardest to reflect on? So put a 1 in the chat if it was identifying your core values, or put a 2 in the chat if it was aligning your values with your actions. So it's kind of like, sometimes I'm maybe not as consistent. And I'll put a 3 in the chat if the difficulty was actually pinpointing where you can be more authentic. So let's see what we've got. We've got loads of 2s. Okay, those are 2s, and that's aligning your values with your actions. And like I said, that can be a real difficult dilemma often. Well, okay. That's a question. That's a good one. So, how do your values align with your actions as a leader? I think it's kind of some of the things that we've been talking about. It's taking that moment to actually reflect and think about, well, what is it that I'm doing? Being really intentional about what my values are, and then making sure that they line up, or kind of challenging yourself to make sure that they line up in those moments in the workplace. So, that's kind of how you do that. You align yourself, you behave consistently. Sometimes it's useful to kind of get feedback around, well, how am I being seen, just to make sure that you are doing that thing and you're doing it more consistently. Because I think once you've got an idea of what you should be doing or could be doing, then then it's easier to just keep practicing doing that behavior. So that's definitely one. Okay. Oh, we've got, okay, lots of 2s. And then also we've got a 4. Oh, so we've got sometimes being part of a structure can be a difficult thing. And I completely kind of get that. And yeah, that makes sense. And then I'm just going to say, finally, then, what holds you back from leading authentically? So does anything kind of gets in the way? Now you've got 4 choices here. Okay, you've got 1, is it fear of judgment? 2, is it having unclear values? So actually not being really sure of what those guiding values, core values are. Is it 3, organizational constraints? So it's just something about the organization, the way it's structured, just the culture of the organization may make that quite difficult. And or 4, if there are any other reasons. Okay, so they're the, what gets in the way, what gets in your way of leading authentically. Okay, so we've got, okay, so that kind of makes sense. So, there are other reasons. So again, depending on the organization and your structure, that could be more of a challenge. But, I always believe, that where there's a will, there's a way, but you might need to really think about how you can engage if you're in those really difficult organizational cultures. And then we've also got, fear of what people think. So that's a big one. It's like, am I going to be judged for, rocking up in my authenticity or not? Am I too much? Am I not enough? All those things can come into play. But I guess, if you are just being truly you, then you'll find a way to allow you to kind of blossom in your organization. So, wow, that's kind of really want to thank you. Thank you for kind of sharing some vulnerability and, being authentic, being real with your answers. I really do appreciate that. And I'm hoping that you found that useful. Okay, so thank you for taking a moment to reflect on your leadership and values. Now, remember that authenticity begins with self-awareness, and even small steps towards alignment can have a big impact on how you lead and how you inspire others. So just kind of increasing your self-awareness and just recognize, you know what, I wish I could close the gap a little bit here, but just taking even the smallest steps will be recognized, and it will make an impact and inspire people around you to do the same. So, authenticity, it does begin with self-awareness and that willingness to take some steps forward. So that's fantastic. Okay, so as we come into towards the end of our time together, I guess my question is, are you curious about the bridge, curious to bridge the gap between where you are now and where and the leader that you aspire to be? So are you curious about, how to bridge the gap between where you are now and the leader that you aspire to be? So if today's session has sparked, and discussion has sparked some reflection, and you're ready to dive deeper into how you can lead with greater authenticity, I'd like to invite you to take the next step. So I'm offering an exclusive leadership impact and influence audit, and to help you to assess how closely your actions align with your core values and how you can kind of fine tune your leadership approach for even greater impact. Now, this audit is a great way to kind of reflect on how your leadership can be more authentic, how it can be more aligned with your faith, and ultimately how it can actually drive success for your organization. Now, spaces are limited, so please use the QR code or click, I'm just going to put a link in there, or click the link in the chat to book a 40-minute leadership audit session soon, if not today. Okay, so there's the kind of link, or you can use the QR code on your screen. Now, so I look forward to kind of working with you to enhance your leadership journey and to help you lead with integrity and, purpose and authenticity. I'm really looking forward to working with you to do that. Okay, so just as we kind of get ready to close out, let's just do a quick recap on today's session. So again, if you've got any further questions or any further comments, please just drop them in the chat for me or for us, and then we can kind of explore those. So today we talked about how leading with authenticity rooted in your faith is not just a personal choice, but it's a business strategy. Faith-based values like integrity, humility, and service foster trust, accountability, and engagement. And when you align your leadership style with these values, you build a culture that inspires loyalty, enhances performance, and strengthens your organization. The impact of leading authentically is clear. You get more engaged employees, you get stronger teams, and in the end, that drives a more profitable business. So who wouldn't want that? See, faith-based leadership brings your true and real self into your workplace, creating a ripple effect of positivity that influences those around you. So for me, it's like you being that, that analogy of the pebble being dropped into a pond. So when you are kind of, leading and showing your faith-based leadership, it's like you become that pebble that's dropped into the pond, and you can see the ripple of positiveness that affects your whole organization. So that's kind of what we're talking about. It's like that's what faith-based leadership can do for you and your organization. So, I just really want to thank you for joining me today. And again, remember that authenticity is about creating a ripple effect of trust, purpose, and engagement in your organization. And when you align your faith and your leadership, you actually inspire others to do the same, building a culture of integrity and long-term success. Okay, so feel free to share your reflections in the chat or to reach out to me. Thank you for that. It's great. Reach out to me. But, let's continue this journey of ethical leadership together. Now, I'm happy to stick around for a few minutes if there are any further questions in the chats. I'm happy to do that. Oh, just a quick one before we close. I really do want to continue to broaden our connection. So to help us continue with this journey of ethical leadership together, I'm working on an idea that I have, which is to create a faith-inspired membership group and full of resources and opportunities to talk more openly and connect with like-minded people. So if that's something that you may be interested in, then please put a yes in the chat, or oh, thank you for that. That's brilliant. So do put a yes in the chat, or to direct message me on LinkedIn, and that way I can kind of keep you in mind as I continue the development. So, if you're interested in kind of a faith-inspired leadership lab membership group, then please put a yes in the chat or direct message me on LinkedIn. Okay, so we've got, okay, fantastic, that's brilliant. So yeah, that's kind of good. So just keep putting your stuff in the chat for me, that's great. So otherwise, I look forward to speaking with some of you, or those of you who have booked a complimentary leadership audit with me. I look forward to working with you and helping us look through identifying those gaps. That'd be great. And this is, oh, fantastic, this is really good. So until next time then, I'm going to say stay blessed. Okay, stay blessed.